We all know Brad Keselowski, always been one of the most outspoken NASCAR drivers of all time. Last week, he published an article talking about the potential future of electric or hybrid race cars in NASCAR, and I thought, even though I'm a little late, we should talk about it. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Usually we talk about what goes on the racetrack, but as is per usual, every now and then, gotta talk about a little news. A little over a week ago at the end of May, Brad Keselowski posted an article both on his own website and on NASCAR.com's website titled, "It's Time, the NASCAR Hybrid." And I remember seeing it when it came out. I heard some people talk about it, but I did not read it because, I don't know, it's summer and I don't feel like reading anything, but eventually I got around to reading it. I heard enough people talk about it. I decided I'd give it a little read, give it a little perusing, so to speak, and it was actually very interesting, and I think Brad Keselowski, we all know, always has something to say whether we like it or not, and I think this is another perfect case of a chance we have to debate about the future of our sport. We all like to talk about the future of NASCAR, what they're doing wrong, what they should be doing right, all that type of stuff. I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about a potentially huge future change for NASCAR. So I'm going to look at a lot of his main points, analyze them a little bit, and then at the end I'll give you kind of my opinion, and then I'll be interested to hear your opinions. Keselowski starts by talking about F1, which I don't know much about F1, so I'm going off what he said here, and he talks about how recently F1 changed to a smaller engine package, and in Keselowski's case, he talked to former F1 fans who are not a fan of the sound, of the style of the current package. He talks about how they use something called the Kinetic Energy Recovery System, or KERS, K-E-R-S, which allows the drivers to store extra energy when they're on the brakes. It stores it into an extra battery that can then, extra energy can be used then at a later time. In his post, Brad Keselowski talks all about how he thinks a key thing about NASCAR is that they stick with the V8 engines to keep it loud and the horsepower. He thinks that's very important. So he then gives his vision for a NASCAR KERS, K-E-R-S system, and this system would supply cars with an extra small reserve of electric energy, almost like having a nitrous button. A nitrous button! That would give drivers a boost of power whenever they needed it. He talks about how this extra bit of power could be used in complementary to gas power to give you a super duper charge, or it could be used by itself to save gas entirely. When talking about how the racing itself would change, he points a lot to the new strategies that would emerge. Teams would not only have to worry about conserving fuel, but they'd have to think about how they're going to use this extra energy, this extra charge, this nitrous that they got saved up. How should they use it? Should they just use it to save gas entirely, or should they use it combined with gas to go extra fast? Keselowski talks about how he believes this would add actually extra horsepower potentially to the race cars at certain periods, as well as making the cars a little more difficult to drive for the drivers and potentially eliminating some of the aerodynamic factors that we see so prevalently displayed today. Now that I don't know about. I feel like aerodynamics are still a huge part, and they're going to need to be worked on if we do this with a race car, but I'll leave my opinions more to the end. I do like this line, however. Let's say a yellow comes out. According to our new parameters, all cars would switch to electric in their hybrid engines in order to save precious fuel. In that moment, the field would go silent and wouldn't be burning gas anymore. This would basically mean that under caution, the track would just go silent, which is actually, if you've been to a lot of races, you can know at a lot of tracks it's hard to talk to people during the race. I mean, you're sitting there trying to have a conversation with your buddy, and these cars come whizzing by at 200 miles an hour making all this noise. You literally cannot talk to people very much. So I do like his point there about how you would give fans an extra 5 to 10 minutes here to be able to talk to each other. I think that's actually a smart plan. So if I could really try to summarize kind of what Brad Keselowski is lobbying here, he's looking at a system that would allow drivers to store up extra electric energy during a race that could either be used at any time to complement gas power and go faster, or be used in place of gas power, which would allow for an extra level, an extra layer of strategy that could make things very interesting. He seems to think that especially on restarts, it would give cars an extra bit of horsepower, make the cars more difficult to drive, which would allow the best drivers to rise to the top. All that stuff sounds great on paper, but would it actually work? Next up in his article, he talks about some of the benefits. And honestly, his first point in the section is arguably the most compelling to me personally. He talks about how Formula E, which is an all-electric racing series, has tons of manufacturers pouring a lot of money into it because they want their brands associated with this futuristic, innovative electric engine thing. He contrasts that with NASCAR, and NASCAR, it's all these heavy, gas-powered, kind of, behind in the curve, still living in the olden days style engines, and he talks about, maybe that's why a lot of manufacturers aren't pouring as much money into the sport as they are Formula E, for example. Keselowski does throw this brief paragraph in there. I don't think that electric cars are the future. The poor infrastructure and manufacturing waste associated with electric cars, and especially with their batteries, make that certain. I believe that hybrid vehicles are the future. which I think is interesting. I mean, I don't know much about the science of all this, to be 100% honest. I know Tesla's very big in the news with their electric cars and stuff, but I know they're kind of struggling financially as well, so it seems like a very interesting deal. I guess it's just nice. Keselowski, there's his opinion. He just believes in hybrids. One of the other big benefits that he talks about also has to do with manufacturers, and it's one of the reasons many manufacturers might want to get into NASCAR if they were to switch to hybrids. Because right now, Ford, Chevy, Toyota, when they try things on the NASCAR racetrack, a lot of this stuff is not going into their street vehicles that they sell to customers. They're designing things separately for this racing package that they're not really going to see benefit them anywhere else. If we were to switch, as Keselowski seems to believe, to this hybrid energy deal, manufacturers, companies like that could test things on race cars that could easily be switched into, a street vehicle. There's new technology still being developed every day, every week that they can try out on these race cars and then potentially churn out to the general public and sell, at dealerships. So there's another kind of win-win scenario there for manufacturers, and Keselowski seems to think that would result in a lot more investment from big brands, big companies like that into NASCAR. I think that's a very interesting point that gives NASCAR a more of a futuristic, more of a ahead of the curve, with the times feel. Every company, every brand wants to be like hip. They want to be cool. They want to be like the it thing. And I think NASCAR right now is kind of lagging behind in that. But this, I think I actually will agree with Keselowski on this main point, especially that this would make NASCAR look more cutting edge. Brad does put this paragraph in at the benefits, and I'm still not 100% sure if I buy it yet. We'd have more passes for the lead and more scenarios that would help us be more entertaining as a sport. As we try to cultivate the next generation of fans, more dynamic racing driven by a hybrid NASCAR V8 seems like the right direction to be headed in. And I do agree, we're trying to attract a new generation of fans, and the new generation is going to be growing up with a lot of hybrid cars, so that makes sense, but I don't necessarily 100% agree that the racing is just going to automatically be better because you've given these cars an extra layer to worry about. Just because I can hit a switch that makes my car go faster for a few seconds doesn't necessarily immediately mean that the racing is going to be better. I think I agree, he kind of acts like it could be more dynamic, more complex maybe, which is potentially good for a newer audience, but it's not, I can't sit here and immediately say, oh yeah, it's going to be way better. I don't know where he's getting the idea that there's automatically going to be more passes for the lead. I don't know how you can gather that just from what he's talking about. But still, I'll move on. I'll save more of my opinions for the end. This is a very interesting topic. Keselowski ends his little post here by talking about some of the potential challenges. And the first big challenge, and probably the biggest challenge of all, is money. Money. He talks about how he thinks the big teams could definitely afford it and could, be able to start working on this right away. He just talks about how it could hurt some of the smaller teams. But then he throws this line in there. The truth is that struggling teams are always going to be struggling teams. We can't let that get in the way of making the sport better. When you first read that, you feel like, man, that's just rude. But at the same time, I think he's 100% right. We can't sit here and worry about those teams running 30th every week and focus so much on them that the rest of the sport suffers. That's just not right. So money could still be an issue, but Keselowski seems to think it's doable. I don't know the finances of it specifically, but if he thinks it's doable, it's probably doable. Another big challenge he talks about is safety. These batteries, they're very sensitive, I don't know if that's the right word, but these big batteries, these powerful batteries with all this energy in them, it can be very easily, especially if there's a huge wreck or something big or a car catches on fire, that these batteries could easily ignite or possibly explode, and that could be very, very, very dangerous. Keselowski notes that, but then he also talks about how NASCAR are so safe, especially with that roll cage. He suggests putting the battery kind of near where the driver sits, which I don't know if the drivers would love that, but putting it near where the drivers sit so it's inside the roll cage so that the odds of it ever getting crushed or anything like that, or actually damaged in a wreck, are very, 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 very slim. So, I'll give him credit. He's posing these challenges and talking about some decent solutions, perhaps. So I'll give him credit. He's given this a lot of thought. His last challenge is talking about how the rules would change, and this is where he might lose some people, because if there's one thing we all know about, especially old school NASCAR fans, is they do not like rule changes. At least in this case, though, we're probably not talking about like point system or playoff system changes. We're talking about the actual on-track racing rule changes. He mentions that there could be parameters as to when you can use your little nitrous button and so on. So I don't know what NASCAR would come up with in that sense, but there are different rules, and I know a lot of people don't like new rules, especially because it feels like there's new rules every week. So that could be a real challenge, especially getting people on board at first. But anyway, yeah, that is basically a summary of his article, and I encourage you to go read the actual article. I'll put it in the description. I'll link to it in the description if you haven't read the whole thing. I've summarized basically most all of it, but it's maybe you might go in there and find some more details to help your own understanding. As far as my opinion on this topic, I'm not a big Brad Keselowski fan. I think Brad Keselowski's very outspoken, sometimes so much so that it's just kind of obnoxious and annoying. But I'll give him credit. He's always looking for ways to engage NASCAR and its fans and thinking about new possibilities. He was one of the first people to talk about how Ford needed a new car, and now they're getting the Mustang for next year. And now he's talking about this, and I'll be honest, it doesn't sound crazy. Maybe this is just because I'm a young fan who's grown up in this age of technology and all that stuff, but this seems like it makes a lot of sense. Honestly, the only thing that should be stopping NASCAR from doing this is the money behind it, is that it would cost a lot of money to develop these technologies. I don't think NASCAR needs to worry. I don't think NASCAR should honestly care about the fans that would be mad about a hybrid engine. I get there are a lot of fans of NASCAR that love the horsepower, the gas engines, the loud noises, and all that, and Keselowski's trying to keep, what says he's going to be able to keep all that with this package. He just wants to add in a little bit of electricity. That's all. A lot of people talk about how NASCAR alienated its core fan base when making all these big tracks and when it blew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's partially true. But if you ask me, NASCAR today, the bed they've made for themselves, they need to just go out there and try to target newer, younger generations of fans. I do this YouTube channel because I love interacting with so many different fans, and a lot of you guys that watch this stuff are younger fans. Typically, most of y'all are probably in your 20s or younger. That's just what I've seen. And I think it's really important for this generation like mine and people near my age and stuff like that, especially to really help vault NASCAR into the future. And I think this hybrid energy, this hybrid engine type deal could help with that. Fans that are going to be like, oh, I don't like all this change, NASCAR, this isn't what I grew up with. NASCAR just needs to stop worrying about those fans because they're never going to be able to please them. And at this point, there's less and less of them going, and there's more and more new fans coming in that are much more open to changes like this. And I honestly think NASCAR just needs to forget about those fans. If you couldn't handle this, if you couldn't handle when Toyota came into the Cup Series, then I'm sorry, NASCAR just needs to forget about you. Because NASCAR is a worldwide sport. It's not as big worldwide as F1, but there are NASCAR fans from all over the world. They come from so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures, honestly, and to act like, your way is the only way isn't fair. I agree with Keselowski that NASCAR needs to appear more cutting edge. They need to move with the times. There are a ton of hybrid energy cars. I don't know if electric cars are ever going to be the real deal, they're going to be the top dog or anything like that, but hybrid cars are here. And there are tons of manufacturers, tons of money in that industry that could support NASCAR and that would be probably willing to support NASCAR if they were to make a change like this. So that's my opinion. I'm not saying this needs to be done like now. I'm not saying it definitely won't be done now, but maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we could see something like this start to take shape. And if you ask me, I don't think that would be a very bad thing. So anyway, there you have it. That's basically my kind of jumbled up point of view opinions on this one. I'm trying to give you guys as clear of a point of view as I could give you there, clear statements, but I'm kind of made this video last minute, so I apologize for that. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you to our Patreon supporters right here, and thank you all of you for watching. Leave your comments down below if you agree, disagree, and I encourage you to go read that article, read the actual post from Brad Keselowski. It was very interesting to read about it, and I wish I'd seen it last week when it came out, and I would have made a video about it a lot sooner, because I think this is something that should be discussed. I think if we're going to talk about NASCAR's future, I think this is something that nobody talks about that maybe should be talked about. I think, everyone wants to talk about changing the schedule, changing the aero package, all good things to talk about, all great things to talk about, but this maybe should also be coming up. I know this is, this costs more money than some of those other things I just named, but this could potentially be the biggest, it could be a loss in the short term for a potentially long-term gain if they have a lot of other companies, a lot of other manufacturers want to come in. We could see, Audi or Honda, I don't know about Honda, but we could see other manufacturers come into, Mercedes come into NASCAR and join Toyota, Ford, Chevy, and so on, because it just might be the way of the future, and I'm sure NASCAR is not going to say no to more money. Anyway, there you have it. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll have another episode up later this week where I'll talk more about Pocono, talk about Michigan, and all that stuff. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys again very soon. Have a good one.